Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Sustainable Marblehead's presentation of Green Heating Solutions. I'm Lynn Bryant, the Executive Director of Sustainable Marblehead, and I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this evening for what I'm sure will be an interesting and informative discussion. Despite the beautiful weather that we've been having, winter is around the corner, and our hope this evening is that you'll get some ideas on how to make your home more energy efficient so that you can save money on heating costs while reducing your carbon footprint. I'd like to start by introducing our three panelists. Our first presenter, Stephen Shinopoulos, is a sustainability and education professional with extensive experience regarding environmental issues in Massachusetts. Stephen has worked at HomeWorks Energy for 2 years, beginning as a home energy assessor before moving into a community outreach role. Now, working as business development coordinator, Stephen has fostered partnerships with nonprofits, businesses, and towns in Massachusetts. This work has aided residents in taking advantage of the Mass Save State program, helping to save money and build a more sustainable state. Thank you, Stephen, for being here with us this evening.
Thank you,
Our second presenter, Joe Coles from MWAC, and Joe will explain what MWAC is and its relationship to Marblehead's Light Department, began his career in the industry as a residential and commercial energy auditor for utilities in New York and New Jersey. He has managed utility energy efficiency programs for utilities throughout the country for the last 15 years. He is currently working with municipal utilities in Massachusetts to design and implement energy efficiency programs. He and his family live in East Hampton, Massachusetts. Welcome, Joe, and thank you for joining us. And our facilitator this evening is Steve Wolf, a Marblehead resident with a long-term interest in energy efficient construction. He and his wife, Lisa, recently completed construction of a net zero home here in Marblehead, incorporating an air source heat pump as the primary heating source in the design. Steve draws from a background in environmental engineering and natural science, and currently works at the EPA on coastal sediment and water quality projects. Steve is a member of Sustainable Marblehead's Clean Energy and Public Policy Working Group, which is hosting this event. Thank you, Steve. Just to let you know how we'll spend our time together, we'll hear Stephen's presentation first, followed by Joe's. We'll hold off on answering questions until after Joe's presentation, at which time Steve will facilitate our question and answer discussion. But as you listen to the presentations, please feel free to submit questions using the chat feature. Your questions will serve as the basis for our discussion after the presentations. Enjoy, and I'll turn it over to Stephen.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. And I just want to say thank you to everybody on Sustainable Marblehead for organizing this, and welcome everybody at home. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen now. Okay, so as Lynn said, I work with HomeWorks Energy, which is a partner of the Mass Save State program. We perform home energy assessments, meaning the residential side of things. I'll be walking through a little bit of what the Mass Save program is, its origin, and then what we do as a partner of the program. So Mass Save has been around since the 1970s. In one form or another. So originally, each electric and gas utility company ran their own version of the program. And in 2008, the utilities came together to form one program that we now know of as Mass Save. So as an overview of Mass Save, it is a state mandated program. It's sponsored by utility companies. So some of the biggest players in the program are companies like Eversource, National Grid, and Columbia Gas, as well as some other companies like Berkshire and Liberty. Now, there's often questions about where the funding for this program comes from. So Mass Save is funded by a charge on our utility bills in the state. So for those of us with National Grid, for instance, or Eversource, there's a charge on the bill called the energy efficiency charge, which is at the bottom of the bill. That's what funds the Mass Save program. It's about 5% of the bill. So that's what funds the program and allows us to perform no-cost home energy assessments throughout the state. So a little bit more about Mass Save. There are several programs in the Mass Save umbrella, as we call it. So my domain is in the home residential side, meaning single to four family properties. And as I said, we work with National Grid, Eversource, and Columbia Gas. There are also chapters of the program that deal with larger multifamily buildings, as well as commercial. And these are not aspects of the program that we handle in-house, but we work with other contractors to support those needs when they arise. Okay, so the basics of what we do in Mass Save as offering Mass Save home energy assessments. We offer the standard, of course, the standard home energy assessment, which is a comprehensive look at the home to see how folks can reduce their energy usage, make the home more comfortable, and save money throughout the home. Now, you know, it's a unique time we're in, just unusual and unique circumstances. So the program has adapted to offer virtual home energy assessments as well. It's the same fundamental process, just done via picture and phone and video chat. So it's the same fundamental process, and it just allows an alternative way to take advantage of the program if folks have circumstances that might prevent somebody from coming into the home right now. So one of the primary aspects that we cover in the home energy assessment is, of course, weatherization and insulation work. We try and cover that from the top to the bottom of the house. So I'll go into that in more detail, but that's one of the main rebates that's available through the state program, and one of the easiest ways to reduce your energy usage at home. We also do heating and cooling work. I'm not going to go too much into that tonight because I know we have another presenter who's going to focus on that specifically. But if anybody is interested in Mass Save rebates on that matter, you can just go to masssave.com to look more into that. Now, part of the home energy assessment is, of course, also a health and safety check, and I'll spend more time on that later on and go into that in more detail. And finally, we have what's called the heat loan, which is state financing that's available through having a home energy assessment performed. And that can be used for a wide variety of home improvement projects. And it's another thing I'll cover in more depth as we move forward. Okay, so standard home energy assessment. It's a comprehensive inspection and review of a home's energy performance. So as I said, it's a top to bottom look at the home. We typically start in the basement or where the primary heating source is, and perform what's called a combustion safety test to make sure the heating system is working safely and efficiently. We look at the insulation in the basement, typically the basement perimeter, the rim joist or the sill, and we will insulate that to stop air from drafting into the home and the bottom of the house. Now we move through the house, and we also inspect the walls for insulation, and we inspect the attic for insulation. Those are two of the other typical areas that we'll look at, and areas where there are substantial rebates to, you know, reduce our energy usage at home and make the home more comfortable. Part of the assessment, of course, is also what we call instant savings measures, and those are things like LED light bulbs, programmable thermostats, smart power strips, and water saving devices like shower heads and aerators. And those are installed at the time of the assessment and included at no cost through the state program. So I do want to mention, you know, because we have a specific audience tonight that might be, you know, interested in what the program can do for older homes that are very common in Massachusetts. So I do want to just go through this a little bit, that, you know, of course, older homes had less insulation than is building code today. The building code started to change in the 70s and 80s to where it is today, where it's substantially greater than it used to be. When we work with older homes, we often, you know, take note of what we call pre-weatherization barriers. So that might be knob and tube wiring, which is the original kind of electrical wiring that was used. Structural integrity of walls, for instance, which I'll touch on more in just a moment here. Water damage, which of course, you know, is never good news for a home, and things like asbestos, which, you know, is another issue that we'll take note of. So I mentioned just a moment ago about wall work, and it's particularly important to note on that for older homes, because that's the one area it's really on a case-by-case basis. Many aspects of the program are very easy and low-hanging fruit, so to speak. Wall work is a little more, just a case-by-case kind of thing, where we'll take due diligence and make sure that we're confident in the structural integrity and that the walls can be properly insulated. The program will also help with single pane windows, financing particularly, if folks are interested in that. Obviously, if there's some historical commission, they might necessitate some kind of case-by-case approval for that. And, that's just something that has to be handled, for each unique house. I do want to, make particular note of the things that are available that are quite easy, even in older homes, and very straightforward and typical to install and reduce the energy usage in home. So those would be air sealing, which is targeted spray foam to reduce airflow throughout the home. Things like sealing the top plates in the attic and the sill of the basement. Attic insulation is a very typical and easy way to insulate the home and prevent hot air from escaping during the winter. And also, of course, it helps keep cool air in during the summer if you're conditioning your home. The ISMs that I mentioned earlier, the instant savings measures, which help reduce daily energy usage. And of course, for older homes that very often had crawl spaces, we can also, of course, insulate crawl spaces. Okay, so that's kind of just some case-by-case things for older homes that we pay special attention to when dealing with those. Okay, so combustion safety, as I mentioned, is the first step of a home energy assessment. This is just testing the primary heating source of the home. So whether it's a forced hot water boiler or a forced hot air furnace, we test that. We test the domestic hot water system. And if there happens to be a gas stove, we test that as well. Just making sure, again, that they are working, up to standards and running smoothly. Next, we look at the insulation in the home. So I mentioned this is the rim joist in the basement, which is, the perimeter of the basement. We'll do some of that targeted spray foam around the perimeter. We'll put in fiberglass or rigid foam board, depending on how much room there is on the sill. Moving on to, this is wall work on the top right. So typically, fiberglass batting is very common in walls. Because Mass Save is a retrofitting program, we do blown-in insulation in the walls. So this is blown-in cellulose insulation. And cellulose is the main type of insulation we use. It has a higher R value than fiberglass. It has a very low environmental footprint. It also has some little perks, like it is treated to be fire resistant, and pests also tend to hate blown-in cellulose. So there are some nice advantages to using cellulose beyond just the convenience and the R value. Bottom right, this is an attic, typical attic, where we're going to blow in cellulose. The program is currently rebating up to 15 inches of blown-in cellulose in the attic. And then in the bottom left, we have a knee wall, like a side portion of the attic. And this is unconditioned space. And what you see here is polyiso, or rigid foam board. So this is the same material as sprayed spray foam insulation. It's just made in a prefabricated foam board that we'll use to insulate certain areas of the home. Okay, so I just mentioned that the program is currently covering up to 15 inches of insulation in the attic. This is on the left side is somewhat typical of an older home that you might find in New England, with spotty partial insulation, and the program is just going to take that and update it to a nice fresh coat of 15 inches to maximize the R value in the attic. Here, as part of the installation process, is targeted spray foam. So we like to use the analogy of winter clothing pretty often. So if you think of traditional insulation like fiberglass or cellulose as your winter sweater, targeted spray foam is kind of like your windbreaker. So the insulation stops your conduction, and this targeted spray foam stops convection, cold air moving through the home. So we're sealing up the top plates, we're sealing the perimeter, the rim joist of the basement, and just reducing that airflow as much as possible. And part of the part of the process, of course, is doing health and safety checks throughout the home. So these are some of the examples of pre-weatherization barriers that I mentioned earlier. In the top left, we have mold, which is often a result of water issues in the attic or other parts of the home. The top right, we have knob and tube electrical wiring, which is the original form of electrical wiring that was used. It's still perfectly functional, but it can pose somewhat of a fire hazard if doing insulation work. In the bottom left, we have vermiculite, which is a natural and pretty effective form of insulation. But it was found that where they were mining vermiculite from sometimes had asbestos laced in the rock, the ore area. So we treat vermiculite as though it has asbestos in it. Now, all of these things that I just mentioned are, what we call pre-weatherization barriers, and we'll, take note of those and make recommendations for how to remediate them and move forward when needed. I left this one independently for some reason because this is a little bit different, and I think everybody at home is probably unfortunately familiar with ice dams to one extent or another. Ice dams are a little bit different than the other three I just mentioned. Fortunately, ice dams can typically be remediated, or the situation can be improved dramatically by improving the insulation. Because of course ice dams are formed when hot air escapes during the winter, melts snow and it refreezes due to the cold air outside. Insulation reduces that heat loss through the roof and therefore helps with ice dams. Okay, so these are the instant savings measures I mentioned earlier. During a home energy assessment, we install new LED bulbs in place of older incandescent bulbs. And we cover pretty much everything from the bulbs in your refrigerator to the outdoor floodlights. And we get on the ladder and we swap those. We have almost every bulb you can think of, including three-way bulbs, globes, candles, pretty much the works. The top right and the bottom right, we have our water saving devices. I've personally, performed an energy assessment at my own house, and I will say that I shower with the MassSave shower head every day, and quite enjoy it. It has very high pressure. And in the bottom left, we have our programmable thermostat. This is a standard Honeywell programmable thermostat included at no cost through the program, and we also install it during the assessment. These can be set on a timer, so it can kick on and kick off at desired times of the day. And help to reduce some energy usage and just keep things on a nice schedule when desired. So I'm moving forward to, this is the report for the instant savings measures. This is actually I did the assessment at my parents' house last year. So this is the ISM report, the ISM receipt from auditing my family's house. And as you can see, I won't go through it item by item, but this is presented at the end of every visit, and it sums up, completing the visit itself. In this case, I installed a new thermostat, aerator, shower head, and a bunch of different light bulbs. So this is always provided at the end of assessments. And in this case, it was almost $500 in value. It's always a $0 receipt. It's always paid for by the program, and it calculates the estimated savings for an annual basis. So this is an average, calculation. So for my parents, it was able to save them about $200 a year, give or take. And this is another assessment I performed last year. So this is an installation recommendation through the program. The program breaks it down into two categories that I mentioned earlier, the air sealing and the weatherization. So air sealing, in addition to targeted spray foam, can also include things like door sweeps and weather stripping for exterior doors. It can include a stair cover for those of us with pull down staircases. And then of course the air sealing. So this is covered at 100% by the state program. So you can see that, in this particular house, it was about $950 value of air sealing. It's always no cost to the homeowner, the air sealing aspect of assessments. And you can see the estimated annual savings, which this homeowner was going to save about $175 annually from the air sealing measures. The second portion of the recommendations are the weatherization work. So this includes things like insulating the walls when appropriate, adding insulation in the attic, and this one also included some rigid foam board for certain portions of the home. Now, this portion of the work is covered at 75% off typically. So you can see that it was about $2,800 for the homeowner. The state throws in 75% of that, and the homeowner was left with a 25% copay or $710. So it also calculates the estimated annual savings for this weatherization work and the estimated return on investment. So this homeowner was looking at about 1.4 years to realize the return on their investment, and just at that point be saving money from having that work done. At the end of the home energy assessment, we go over our report and findings with the homeowner. And of course, every house is unique. So we, address any just unique circumstances we might have found in the home, all of our recommendations, what the homeowner can do to improve the efficiency of their home, and how to move forward with those recommendations. Now, this is a slide just touching on the, unique circumstances that are, in effect kind of throughout the country right now. We are, of course, taking a strong stance on health and safety. The program, as I said earlier, has adopted virtual assessments, but for our traditional home assessments, we're taking every measure we can to do that safely and effectively. We, of course, wear masks, we have safety goggles, we wear Tyvek suits or use full body disinfectant. And that is done throughout the assessments and the any insulation work that's done. So you can see our crew here is, performing a combustion safety test. This is using fiberglass batting in the attic. And this is before doing wall work. And in all cases, we're, wearing that PPE. So we're taking every measure we can to do that safely and effectively. Okay, and I mentioned the heat loan earlier. So this is the state financing that is available through having a Mass Save home energy assessment. It is 0% financing. It can cover things like heating systems and hot water, cooling. It can finance single pane window replacements. You can also be used for insulation copay. I will take a quick note here and just say that this is a one-time use per household financing option. So folks don't typically use it for the insulation just because, as I showed on that receipt earlier, the insulation copay is typically not very large, and it's often better saved for things like windows and potentially heating and cooling that are bigger ticket items. It can also be used to remediate health and safety issues that I touched on earlier. So things like asbestos and mold and knob and tube wiring can be the state financing can be applied to those to help remediate those. All of these recommendations and upgrades must of course meet Mass Save standards. The financing is supplied when the assessment is performed. So that's how the state financing is accessed. And the state financing is, as I said, 0%. It's up to a $25,000 value over 7 years. So that's a summary of the state financing. And just kind of to sum up why, the advantages of the program and why people do this so often. People have very different reasons for this. One thing that, it does benefit everybody is that it does save people money across the board. It's pretty typical to have the return on investment just be 1 or 2 years because of the state rebates. So that's, it certainly doesn't hurt that it will help the finances a little bit. Moving on, it is obviously also going to help comfort. You have a better insulated home. It's going to make the home warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer. So that's just, to emphasize the comfort aspect of the assessment and the work that we do. It is also, of course, helping to be green. So, if we're using less energy and less heat, of course, that's going to have a lower carbon footprint, and it's going to improve the environmental impact of our homes. We do also address health and safety issues. So it's a comprehensive look at the home. And just to cover all of the bases, we pay special attention to health and safety concerns. It is also an important form of preserving homes. So of course, we're weatherizing them. We are reducing airflow throughout the home, which is going to help preserve the home in the long run and make it, have greater longevity. Okay, so, Homeworks Energy, where I work, and Sustainable Marblehead have been working together to help spread the word and support each other in our work. Community partnerships are a really important way that we reach Massachusetts residents. It can be tough to get the word out about what the current happenings are in the state program. So we really value community partnerships in helping us, reach Massachusetts citizens and get the word out. We're trying to support Sustainable Marblehead's work. So for anyone who, is interested in performing a home energy assessment, for every assessment that's performed in our partnership, we're making a $25 donation to Sustainable Marblehead to support the, wide variety of excellent environmental work that they do. I'm providing the link here if anybody would like to pursue a home energy assessment. And I've also provided my work number here if anybody has more particular questions or just wanted to discuss in more detail. I'm always happy to discuss what's available through the program and just, explore how we can make homes more efficient throughout the state. So I'm going to pass it along now, and I'll be available for questions later during the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen.